Hello, all. This evening, I'm going to talk about the Mechanical Hound in Fahrenheit 451. This is going to be part of a few videos that are just going over some of the topics of the first and second parts of the book as a way of refreshing our memory of what happened earlier on in the book, since it's been a little while since we looked at it, and also as a way of studying for a cumulative test that we can expect in a few weeks after we finish the book. So this video is going to focus on the Mechanical Hound. We'll talk a little bit about the Firemen, and then obviously I will also mention Beatty and Montag, since those are our main characters in the story so far. I will not discuss the Mechanical Hound in part 3, but only make reference to what's going on in part 1 and part 2 that's building up then to the action that you will read in part 3. Okay, so I'm going to start off by reading to you about the Mechanical Hound. I'm going to ask that you bear with me. Public speaking in front of a video is very different than public speaking in front of a class. So I'm on page 21 in the book, which I'm going to guess is around page 5, 6, maybe 7 in the digital copy if you do not have your own copy of the book. So I'm starting at the bottom of page 21. It says, "The Mechanical Hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel back in a dark corner of the firehouse. The dim light of 1 in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on sensitive capillary hairs in the nylon brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, its 8 legs spidered under it on rubber-padded paws." So I'm going to stop there. What you should have is a visual of a dog-like machine that has 8 legs and is made of brass, copper, and steel, and also has bits of ruby glass, so reddish glass. And then it has this muzzle or like set of nostrils, basically, that has these little antenna, I guess you could kind of think of them. It says capillary hairs, and if you remember from biology, capillaries are very, very tiny, so they're kind of like these very fine hairs or antenna that probably help the hound detect the things around him. And I'm only calling him a him because it's convenient. To me, it's an it. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. You will remember on the next couple of pages, there's an incident where Montag tries to touch the Mechanical Hound. The Mechanical Hound effectively growls at him, which then leads to a conversation between Montag and Beatty. This conversation is on page 24, which will probably be on the digital copy about 1 page after the description of the Mechanical Hound. So, Montag says, "It doesn't like me." "What, the hound?" The captain studied his cards. "Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire storage batteries and electricity." Montag swallowed. "Its calculators can be set to any combination. So many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right?" "We know all that. All of those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It could be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory, a touch of amino acids perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now, reacted toward me." "Hell," said Captain. Irritated, but not completely angry, just enough memories set up in it by someone so it growled when I touched it. "Who would do a thing like that?" asked the captain. "You haven't any enemies here, Guy." "None that I know of. We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow." "This isn't the first time it threatened me," said Montag. "Last month it happened twice." "We'll fix it up, don't worry." But Montag did not move and only stood thinking of the ventilator grate in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, mightn't they tell the hound? Okay, so I am just going to stop there. I'm going to remind you that this all happened in the first half of part one. So this is before we really even knew that Montag had books. It's before the fire with the woman who lit her own match. And it's before we find out that Montag has all those books hidden behind the ventilator grates. We did get a mention of the ventilator grate, so we are thinking, that this is foreshadowing that he does actually have books hidden behind that grate. What this should also tell you is that at the beginning of the book, before we ever knew anything about Montag, okay, even on page 1, when we got all of that description about a bad dude he was, as this firefighter, that he was kind of this kind of evil, I guess, for lack of a better word, character, okay, before we kind of figured out that he had a conscience, that he had books hidden in that ventilator grill, and somehow the Hound knew, okay, which probably means that Beatty has known since page 1 of this book that Montag has had books hidden in the ventilator grill. So, a little bit more description about the Mechanical Hound is that the Mechanical Hound, like Beatty said, does not think, okay? It's programmed to go after a certain person based on the calculations that they put into the Hound. And so, likely the reason that it growled at Montag is exactly what he suspected, is that part of his blood code, or I don't know exactly what it is, but his amino acids or his sulfur count or whatever it is has been programmed into the Hound, and so the Hound then growls at him or is suspicious of him. Flash forward to the end of part 1, beginning of part 2, when Montag is reading the books with Mildred in the hallway, and they hear the scratching of the Mechanical Hound at the door. Okay, obviously, again, the Mechanical Hound is after Montag. And if you remember, that was after that whole conversation with Beatty, where Beatty had talked to Montag about what could happen if a fireman took home a book, okay, that he would have 24 hours to turn it back in with no consequences. So Beatty has known this whole time. And I know that we already know that because we know that he shows up at Montag's house at the end of part 2, which is where we're picking up. But I'm videoing. The joys of home offices. Okay. But Beatty already knows this about Montag, okay? It just was a long time coming. It took us 2 whole parts of the book to figure out that Beatty has known all along. Okay, so I'm just going to talk real quickly about the firemen. They're really just bystander type characters. Well, in some cases, bystander type characters. You can basically typecast them as that description of Montag at the very beginning, where they all kind of have this sinister obsession with, it's not an obsession, it's their job, but their job is to burn books. They're pretty ruthless. They don't seem to have hearts. And if you look back at part 1, there's this whole scene where Montag talks about how they program the blood of rats and cats and chickens and, other helpless creatures into the Mechanical Hound, and then kind of play this cruel game where they set it loose and the Mechanical Hound goes after it. And remember, the Mechanical Hound kind of has this stinger, I guess, for lack of a better word, that's full of a poison, basically, that will knock someone out. And that's how the Mechanical Hound gets, I guess, the people who are harboring books that the firemen are after. So the firemen play this game. It's a pretty ruthless game, okay? And this is important because if you remember, Faber and Montag's plan is to plant books, okay, in firemen's houses, and then basically call in and give tips that firemen are taking books home to kind of frame them. And so maybe this kind of shows us that firemen don't really, the majority of firemen, Montag not included, don't really deserve any type of mercy, I suppose, that their plan to frame the firemen is kind of justified because the firemen are ruthless and kind of heartless anyway. So I hope that clears up some about the Mechanical Hound and the Firemen and a little bit of what we read in parts 1 and 2. And that's it. Good night.